Athens, 399 BC. In the birthplace of democracy, an old man stands before a jury of his fellow citizens. He has no lawyer. He offers no apology in the modern sense, and before the day is over, the city will decide that his questions deserve death. His name is Socrates. For decades, he has stopped politicians, poets, soldiers, and ambitious young men in the streets, asking them to explain what they claim to know. What is justice? What is courage? What makes a life good? Again and again, confident answers collapse under his questioning. Now Athens accuses him of corrupting the young, rejecting the city's gods, and introducing strange divine powers. The charges sound religious, but behind them lies a deeper story: war, humiliation, political terror, and a democracy frightened by the people who had recently tried to destroy it. Socrates is not a simple martyr, and Athens is not a simple villain. He could be arrogant, provocative, and deeply suspicious of popular judgment. Some of the most dangerous men in the city's recent history had listened to him. Yet, when powerful governments ordered him to act unjustly, he refused, even when refusal could have cost his life. So why did a democracy kill its most famous questioner? To understand the verdict, we must return to an Athens still bleeding from defeat, and to a man who believed that an unexamined life was not worth living. Socrates left no books. Almost everything we know about him comes through other voices: the philosophical dialogues of Plato, the recollections of Xenophon, and the comic caricature created by Aristophanes. They do not always agree. The historical Socrates stands behind them like a figure seen through several imperfect mirrors. He was born around 469 BC, an Athenian citizen from the district of Alopes. Ancient tradition made his father a stoneworker and his mother a midwife. Socrates later compared his own questioning to midwifery. He did not place wisdom inside another person. He helped bring their ideas into the open, where they could be tested. He was not merely a talker. He served as a hoplite in the Peloponnesian War and gained a reputation for physical endurance and courage. But his battlefield became the public spaces of Athens. Barefoot, plainly dressed, and indifferent to wealth, he approached people who claimed expertise and asked short, persistent questions. This method could feel less like a lesson than a public dismantling. A statesman might define justice, only to discover that his examples contradicted one another. A poet might produce beautiful work, but fail to explain its meaning. Socrates insisted that recognizing ignorance was the beginning of wisdom. To admirers, this was intellectual honesty. To the embarrassed, it was humiliation. Plato's account connects his mission to the oracle at Delphi. Socrates' friend Chaerephon asked whether anyone was wiser than Socrates, and the oracle reportedly answered no. Socrates interpreted the puzzle this way: he was wiser only because he did not pretend to know what he did not know. Young aristocrats gathered around him, fascinated by the spectacle of respected men being exposed. Socrates accepted no teaching fee and founded no formal school, but imitation was unavoidable. His followers learned to challenge authority. What they did with that habit was not always noble. In Aristophanes' comedy, The Clouds, produced decades before the trial, a fictional Socrates hangs in a basket, studies absurdities, and teaches people how to make the weaker argument defeat the stronger. It was satire, not biography. Yet the image mattered. Long before legal accusations were filed, Athens had learned to associate Socrates with clever speech, religious doubt, and young men escaping moral responsibility. He called himself a gadfly, sent to awaken a great but sluggish horse. Athens, he believed, needed irritation. The problem was that the horse had recently been wounded, and it was in no mood to be stung. For nearly 3 decades, Athens and Sparta had fought for control of the Greek world. The Peloponnesian War exhausted Athens. Disease killed thousands. Military disasters shattered confidence. In 404 BC, the city surrendered. Its walls were torn down, its fleet reduced, and its empire lost. Then came political terror. With Spartan support, a narrow oligarchy seized power. History remembers its leaders as the 30 tyrants. In only a few months, they executed opponents, confiscated property, and drove many citizens into exile. One of their most ruthless figures was Critias, an aristocrat who had once moved in Socrates' circle. Another controversial associate, Alcibiades, had been brilliant, charismatic, and disastrously unreliable. He defected between Athens, Sparta, and Persia, while the war still raged. Socrates did not command either man's crimes, and listening to a philosopher does not make the philosopher responsible for every later act. But in the public memory, these relationships were politically toxic. Democratic exiles overthrew the 30 and restored the democracy in 403 BC. To prevent endless revenge, Athens adopted an amnesty that limited prosecutions for crimes committed during the oligarchy. It was an extraordinary act of civic restraint. It also meant that unresolved anger could not always be expressed directly in court. Socrates was difficult to place inside this struggle. He criticized democracy's assumption that a crowd could judge complex matters without knowledge. Plato later compared political leadership to a skilled craft. No one would choose a ship's pilot by popularity alone. Such arguments sounded dangerous in a city where ordinary citizens defended their right to govern. Yet Socrates was no obedient servant of oligarchy. Under the democracy, when officials attempted an illegal collective trial of generals after the Battle of Arginusae, he reportedly resisted the procedure. Under the 30, he was ordered to help arrest Leon of Salamis for execution. Socrates refused and went home, risking punishment until the regime collapsed. The pattern was consistent. He would not treat a vote, a decree, or an order as proof of justice. Conscience had to answer to reason. That independence made him admirable and nearly impossible for any regime to trust. By 399 BC, democracy had survived its immediate crisis, but suspicion remained. Socrates was about 70 years old. He had questioned the city's traditions for decades, attracted privileged young followers, and declined to soften his criticism. His prosecutors could not legally try him simply for being associated with oligarchs or for an old style of political dissent. They could accuse him of impiety and corruption. The trial was therefore more than a disguised political purge, but politics formed its emotional weather. The jurors were not deciding in a calm seminar room. They were citizens of a defeated, occupied, and recently terrorized city. Socrates entered court carrying not only his own words, but the shadows of men who had once listened to him. The formal accuser was Meletus, a relatively obscure poet. He was supported by Anytus, an influential democratic politician, and Lycon, associated with the world of public speakers. Their case charged Socrates with failing to acknowledge the gods recognized by the city, introducing new divine beings and corrupting the young. Athens used large citizen juries. The exact number here is not securely recorded, though roughly 500 is widely inferred from Plato's account. Accusers and defendant addressed the jurors themselves, without a modern judge directing the verdict. Our fullest account is Plato's Apology. It presents a defense speech, not a transcript, and Plato shaped it as literature. Still, it preserves the essential outline of how Socrates wanted his life and mission understood. He first confronts the older accusations. The image of a man who investigates the heavens and makes weak arguments appear strong. That caricature, he says, has influenced the jury for years. Then Socrates questions Meletus. If he corrupts young people, who improves them? Meletus effectively answers, almost everyone else. Socrates calls this absurd. With horses, only a few skilled trainers improve them. Why should human education work in the opposite way? If any harm is unintentional, instruction rather than prosecution is the remedy. On religion, Socrates identifies another contradiction. Meletus accuses him of atheism and belief in divine agencies at once. Socrates also describes an inner divine sign that restrains him from certain actions. To followers, it confirms piety. To suspicious jurors, it may sound like the private innovation named in the charge. A conventional defendant might bring his children into court, weep and ask prominent friends to plead for mercy. Socrates refuses. A verdict should follow justice, he argues, not pity. He will not abandon philosophy even if acquittal depends on silence. Athens is like a powerful horse. He is the gadfly that keeps it awake. This is magnificent moral defiance. It is also a dangerous courtroom strategy. Socrates does little to reassure men who believe their city, their children, and their gods are under attack. He turns the trial into another examination, and the jurors themselves become part of it. The vote for guilt appears to have been close. Athenian procedure then required each side to propose a penalty. The accusers demanded death. Socrates was expected to offer a serious alternative such as exile or a substantial fine. Instead, he first suggests that he deserves free meals in the Prytaneum, an honor normally granted to distinguished public benefactors and victorious athletes. The proposal sounds contemptuous. Guided by friends, he eventually offers a fine. But the damage is done. More jurors reportedly support death than had supported conviction. Socrates tells those who condemned him that killing a critic will not free them from criticism. The harder task is to improve themselves. Then the court's business ends. Athens, wounded democracy, restored democracy. Democracy, proud of its laws, has legally sentenced a philosopher to die. Socrates was not executed immediately. A sacred ship had sailed to Delos for an annual religious mission, and tradition forbade executions until it returned. The delay gave his friends time to plan an escape. In Plato's Credo, money, allies, and a safe destination are ready. Socrates refuses. One should not answer injustice with injustice, he argues. By living in Athens and accepting its protections, he has entered an obligation to its laws. Escape would damage the legal order he has challenged others to improve. The argument remains uncomfortable. Socrates had disobeyed unlawful commands, yet now distinguishes between refusing an unjust act and escaping a lawful sentence. Whether persuasive or not, this prevents his death from becoming a simple story of helpless victimhood. He chooses consistency as he understands it. Plato's Phaedo gives the final scene, though Plato says he was not present. Socrates discusses the soul with friends, then calmly drinks the poison. Coldness and numbness rise through his body until his breathing stops. The drink is traditionally called hemlock, but this literary account is not precise toxicology. His final words ask Crito to offer a rooster to Asclepius, the god associated with healing. The meaning is uncertain. Perhaps death is imagined as a cure. Perhaps Socrates is settling an ordinary religious debt. The ambiguity is fitting. The man who demanded exact definitions leaves history with a final riddle. Why did Athens kill Socrates? Not because democracy inevitably hates truth. Athens had tolerated him for decades, and its restored democracy showed restraint after civil conflict. But Socrates challenged civic authority and refused the emotional language that might have saved him. He died where several forces met: sincere religious concern, resentment built over a lifetime, fear for the young, the disgrace of notorious associates, and the trauma of war and dictatorship. A jury of citizens turned those pressures into a legal verdict. That makes the trial dangerous for every age. Democracies can lose their principles through lawful procedures, popular anger and fear dressed as civic duty. Institutions are operated by people carrying memories and wounds. Socrates offers a second warning. Questioning power is not enough. The questioner must also accept scrutiny. His courage does not make every opinion correct, and his death does not erase his arrogance. The democratic answer to disturbing speech is neither blind worship nor forced silence. It is better argument, fair process, and the discipline to protect dissent, even when the dissenter is difficult. Athens killed Socrates, but it could not kill the question he placed before the city and before us. When our deepest beliefs are challenged, do we examine them or do we punish the person who made certainty uncomfortable?